We are here and we are strong. Let's be counted as we move on. Make a difference, change lives as we tell our different stories. We are capable, beautiful. We are born to do great things. We're unstoppable, incredible, 'cause we're differently abled, differently.
John F. Kennedy says, one person can make a difference and everyone should try it. In this episode, we feature people who are making a difference in their society in their own small ways. My name is Jane Theory and this is Able Differently.
We're differently abled, differently.
Rossyln Njuguna is a sign language interpreter and volunteer. She says her passion in sign language started when she was in campus. Take a look at that story.
I find fulfillment in working with the deaf. These are the words of Rossyln Njuguna, a sign language interpreter and sign language volunteer at the All Saints Cathedral, Nairobi, whose passion in the said field started in her early campus years.
It's been very interesting and at the same time very enlightening, because when I started learning sign language, I was doing it as passion, just a language that people learn French, people learn German, and I felt sign language is different. I won't be like everyone else. I'll be special, I'll be unique. So immediately I started learning. I was just a sign language user. So there's a difference between someone who knows the language and they use the language, and someone who actually interprets. That's a whole different level, because for an interpreter, your main responsibility or your main task is to ensure that the deaf person gets access to accurate information in whatever setting. For a sign language user, I just know the language, and if I'm in a position where I meet a deaf person, I'm able to communicate with them.
The church has a role to play in inclusion, and thanks to the All Saints Cathedral and several others, we are on our way there.
All Saints Cathedral Church is actually one of the churches in Nairobi that has focused on inclusion for people with disabilities and also the deaf. We do have a deaf service that runs from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. every Sunday, and it's a full deaf service, meaning every activity that's undertaken is led by the deaf and is done in sign language. We also have a ministry called Special Ability Ministry that's responsible for advocating and ensuring that the church and the congregation is aware about people living with disabilities and actually doing activities or awareness activities around that.
While sign language is a silent language, it has spoken loudly in Rossyln's profession through the numerous platforms that she's been able to access so far.
In my journey as a sign language interpreter and a user of the language, I've been able to get to support and be aware of the different organizations and institutions that are really working to ensure that the deaf actually have access to the various opportunities and fight or access it equally like any other. I've been fortunate enough to have a community of people. I'm a member of the Kenyan Sign Language Interpreters Association of Kenya. That's a body that governs the interpreters in Kenya. I've also been able to make very good friends with the deaf community, such that I've been able to support them at their personal levels, various needs that they have. If it's maybe a place or they need interpretation services, I've been able to do that. And I've also been able to actually give of my resources, maybe my time and my skill to support different organizations. I can mention a few of the organizations that I've been fortunate to learn of by the virtue that I'm a sign language interpreter and I work with the deaf. And the first one is DOE, that's Deaf Outreach Program, if I got it right. It's an organization that focuses on translating the Bible into Kenyan Sign Language to ensure that the deaf are able to access it. There's also an organization called Lugha Ishara. They advocate for children, deaf children, to be able to acquire the necessary language and reduce language deprivation. I've also been able to work with a number, there are quite a number, really trying to remember all of them, but also being able to be involved in, again, advocacy and opportunities like here at the cathedral. I really thank the All Saints Cathedral Church because they've really been keen on ensuring that the deaf are actually included, and they've also taken the step to actually involve us as the interpreters and as well as the deaf community.
Lack of general awareness about deaf issues, and in particular the lack of sign language uses in everyday public spaces, creates the biggest barriers to the deaf and their integration into the society.
Deafness is a silent disability. You can't really tell if someone is deaf unless maybe you see them having a hearing aid, or they sign and then you're able to understand, okay, they're deaf. So most people aren't really excited to learn about the language, about sign language. Most people have a different perspective. They think it's hard. They think they have very, very different ideologies about the language itself. And the deaf, there are very different myths that revolve around the deaf. So that's one of the challenges that I've experienced. Again, them being able to access services like any other person.
September 19th to 25th, 2022 marked the International Deaf Awareness Week with the theme Building Inclusive Societies for All, and clearly there is much that still needs to be done to hit the inclusion bar.
Like, you have to work together for you to be able to achieve an inclusive society. Because if maybe currently there's a talk about CBC, and we know various organizations that are advocating for deaf children and for learning opportunities. It's important that they are invited to the table to have such conversations, such that you're able to come from a point of knowledge, because you don't know everything. Also, I don't know everything. It's always been a learning process. Every single day I learn something about the deaf. I learn about a new organization that's championing for deaf people. So right now, extend the invitation to them. Extend the invitation to the different organizations and be like, let's have a conversation. Let's see how we can work together, pool our resources to ensure that even as we are implementing CBCs, the deaf children are not left behind. Like, we actually understand the resources that they need and not come from a point of, because something that I've really seen is you tend to assume, okay, they need this, and you focus all your resources, all your energy in this thing, and then later on discover that they don't actually need it. So that's a waste of resources and time, but it would be better if inquire, what do you want? What are the current challenges? How are we able to solve them? Who can we bring on board to solve them? And how are we able to ensure that persons with disabilities or even the deaf live a holistic life and are able to access all these things that we need in our daily life without the burden?
Let's take a short break and we'll be right back with more. Don't go too far.
We're differently abled, differently.